The animation for the alarm clock is driven by two geometry nodes. One allows you to adjust the speed of time and set the time, while the other is responsible for the alarm animation and can adjust the power and speed of the shaking. I've also added some extra effects to the animation type. Let's go through the process of creating these geometry nodes. This tutorial uses Blender 3.6.2. This is a model of an alarm clock, nothing special. You can use your own model as long as it has second, minute, and hour hands. Separate the geometry node panel. The timeline panel will need to be used later. Select the second hand and add a geometry node to it. To make adjustments easier, switch to the front view. Add a transform geometry node. My model is oriented along the y-axis, so changing the y-axis rotation achieves the basic rotation. We know that the second hand rotates 6 degrees per second. Add a combine XYZ node to control the Y value change separately. Note that the 6 here is different from the 6 degrees in rotation. I need to convert the value to degrees, so add a math node and select to radians. This value now matches the rotation value. Add the time to the degree input. Before playing the animation, it's essential to note that this node setup is independent of the frame rate, so you don't need to worry about the frame rate. Drag the timeline to 1 second and observe that the second hand has only moved a bit. Place my mouse over it to see that the second is 1. This 1 is eventually converted into 1 degree. We know the second hand rotates 6 degrees per second, so add a multiply node and set it to 6. Play the animation, and you'll achieve the desired result. Time is in a 60-base system, and setting up the minute and hour hands will be very simple. Now, organize the nodes a bit. Use Shift+P to add a frame. You need to enable this add-in to use the frame feature. Now, add animation of minute hand. I prefer to put objects in collections for easier model replacement. Select the previous second hand, pin the geometry node editor. Copy these two nodes. Add a collection node. Then set it to input, so I can flexibly select the collection in the Properties panel. Hold down Shift to select the frame, and then use Ctrl+P. The group input node can be moved inside this frame. Select the minute hand in the Properties panel. Add a join geometry to combine the second hand and minute hand together. Then you will find the position of the minute hand has shifted. Choose Relative to fix it. Hide the collection of minute hand, it does not need to be displayed. The minute hand rotates at a speed of 1/60th of the second hand, so divide it by 60 to get the rotation value. Link it to the y-axis and play the animation. To see the results clearly, set the timeline length to 1 minute and drag the timeline. The minute hand's rotation is correct. Use the same method to add the hour hand. The hour hand rotates at a speed of 1/3600 of the second hand. Great! The basic animation is done. Now, let's add the time scaling effect, which can be used to create animations for time passing, standing still, or reversing time. Simply add a multiply node after the time node, and set this value as an input for external adjustment. Rename the input for convenience. Then adjust the timescale to see if the effect meets expectations. My model is oriented along the y-axis. To make this geometry node more versatile, I'll add an option for choosing which axis to rotate. Hold down Shift plus right mouse button can merge multiple connection lines into one. Add 3 switch nodes. Change type to float. Hold Ctrl plus right mouse button to disconnect the default y-axis link, and connect each switch to the respective axis. Play the timeline and turn on the y-axis switch to check if the effect is correct. Test X and Z as well. They work as expected. I will check the switch for the x-axis, then set input to it. This will rotate along the x-axis by default setting in the Properties panel. Add Y and Z as well. Use the same method to add switches to the minute and hour hands. Then share the same XYZ input. After adding everything, test whether the effect is correct. Next, let's add the ability to set the time. Add an add node to the flow of the second hand. Similarly, add an offset node to the minute and hour hands. Then adjust it in the Properties panel to see the effect. When the mouse slides a long distance, the hand rotates a little. It's not very convenient to adjust like this. This is because when setting the rotation speed for the second and minute hands, the values were divided. Multiply them back to make it easier to adjust the time. The purpose of this is just to have a good operational experience. In this way, I can easily adjust the time by sliding the mouse the same distance. Here I adjusted the position of each parameter. And sort out the nodes a little to make the whole logic look clearer. Let's add the final effect. Add a math node and select floor. It rounds the values to integers. This gives animation a new form of expression. Add a switch node to control this effect. Now, this node setup is complete. And it may seem complex, but the logic is clear. Next, let's create the geometry node for shaking. Select the hammer, place the origin at the center of the clock, and add a geometry node to it. Transform geometry will also be used. To make the hammer swing back and forth, we'll use the sine function. Add a math. Also requires a combine XYZ node. Select sine. Connect to Y and adjust the value. This value can change the speed of the shake. Remember the previous conversion of values to degrees? Add A to radians node after sine. Then add time to the value of sine. Before sine, add a multiply node to control the shake speed. After sine, add another multiply node to control the shake's power. Then set inputs for them respectively. Finally, add a switch to control whether the shake is active. And the geometry node for shaking is complete. Now, add shaking to the two ears. Separate the two ears and set the origin at here. Add the shake node I just created. You can select both of them, hold Alt, and change the properties together. Last of the last. Also add XYZ axis settings to this shaking node. Finally, my work is complete. I will share this file for free on Buy Me a Coffee, so you can use it to create your time animations. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.